Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's World Spotlight video, we're going to be taking a look at Joltik Box. Now, I've actually been playing this in the last couple of weekends for League Cups because I do think it's in a pretty decent meta position for the first time in a little while, and I think this could be a low-key sleeper for the World Championships. Let's get into the overview then of today's video. We're going over the general strategy of Joltik Box, going over a skeleton list, also talking about the recent event history and the online matchup data for the deck. We're then going to discuss the other inclusions the deck can have, give some example deck lists, and we're also going to end on some matchup tips and tricks. Starting off with the general strategy of this deck then, it really does revolve around the tandem unit of Miraidon, because one Ball Search card from Miraidon unlocks both of Joltik and the Pokemon you'd like to power up with the Jolting Charge attack. The Joltik's attack allows you to search the deck for 2 Grass Energy and 2 Basic Lightning and attach them to your Pokemon in any way that you like. So in a lot of instances, you can fully load an Iron Hands into matchups that have slow evolving setups, and against other multi-prize matchups, you can start powering up Pikachu with at least the Lightning and Grass Energy, and then also look to attach energy elsewhere. Because of course we're so flexible here, we can also throw energy onto Miraidon. Photon Blaster is still a really decent option into Basic EX Pokemon. And having a mix and match approach, sometimes putting like 1 on a Pikachu or a Miraidon and 3 on an Iron Hand so it's still ready for the following turn. These are all options available to us to remain fairly flexible, because 1 energy on either Miraidon or Pikachu is actually very threatening because we have the Crispin Supporter as a 4 count in the deck, meaning that we can then attack with those Pokemon in the following turn, provided we have access to that supporter card. So the flexibility of the Joltik attack plus the raw amount of energy that you can accelerate makes this a really, really solid card that essentially sees you through the remainder of the game just from manual attachments, and every now and then the use of your Crispin Supporter in addition to your manual attachments should mean that even with the expensive attack costs of Iron Hands and Pikachu that of course discards at the same time, you can whittle down those prize cards knowing that you oftentimes have the Blood Moon Luna as a late game finisher on a lot of board positions, or just with enough Crispin, get yourself over the line, reloading some of these powerful attackers. The other aspect of the deck is having some crucial type coverage in the format. Both your Iron Leaves EX and the Stage 1 Galvantula are grass type Pokemon that can help deal with Charizard EX as well as Grimmsnarl EX. And that Lily's Clefairy EX, of course, can be massive against the Dragapult players, and also solid against Raging Bolt. Let's take a look at a skeleton deck list then for Joltik Box, and as you can see, we're quite thin on our attacking line, lots of one-offs going on in here, and that's because one Ball Search card, like I said, gets us access to the ones that we want. Essentially, we play 2 copies of Joltik, Hands, Pikachu, and Miraidon because we don't want to prize those guides, and it would be really awkward if you did. The other ones, again, you obviously don't want to prize them in specific matchups, but not so much that you really necessarily need to play 2 copies, especially when in a lot of situations, you're starting off with Iron Hands EX anyway, so you still have a decent shot, even if it is prized, of taking it from those first 2 prize cards as well. Beyond the attacking options, Latias provides free retreat for our entire deck, and Mew EX and Fentipity EX both help out topping up on cards. Really important for this deck actually, because we don't draw at all from any of our supporter cards. The deck is all about leaning into these 3 supporters. Boss's Orders for Gust. Arven can be Gust via Prime Catcher, but also is a great card to get us into the game. And you'll notice within the skeleton there are currently no tools, but there will certainly be tools. We just have to discuss which ones are best. So at the same time, we have the utility of getting certain tool cards out of our deck, and then Crispin is going to be that acceleration that can make the Pikachu more reliable and just keep us on top of attachments throughout the entire game. It means that we can burst a Clefairy onto the board in 1 turn, which has generically good damage output even if we're not attacking into dragons, but of course is devastating into those dragon matchups. And with these supporters being so critical, we also play 4 copies of the Pokegear, so we have extra reach towards these supporters when we need them, because we really do lack that draw power. We want to have the extra reach via this item. The Earthen Vessel's a bit of a strange one, where you already have the 14 energy within the deck, and Crispin is an additional 4 outs plus the Pokegear, so in theory you have a bunch of outs just to get those energy throughout the game. However, essentially it's just a fallback. If you have a Ball Search card but no energy in your opener, you can always Arven for Vessel, so that you can get that Jolting Charge off, because the deck's win rate completely plummets to the floor if you don't get a turn 1 Jolting Charge if you've gone second, or a turn 2 if you've gone first. You absolutely have to have that Jolting Charge online to be able to get basically anything done with the deck. Let's take a look at some recent data then for Joltik Box. It was fairly popular in day 2 of the North American International Championships, but none of them made it into the asymmetrical cut. And I think an obvious reason for that is looking at the top deck in day 2, which was Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt was extremely popular in day 1 of the competition and very popular in day 2, and that's one of the mainstream awkward matchups for Joltik Box, and one of the main things I think holding it back from being a serious contender at the NAIC. However, it could just be me with this opinion, but a lot of the narrative right now is moving away from Raging Bolt being the best deck in the room, and instead moving towards the multitude of stage 2s and Golden Go as the currently best aggressive attacking option in the game. And I think this might be the first time in a long time, and again, this is all based on my own metagaming, this could be one of the few opportunities where there's going to be a sub 10% Raging Bolt in the day 1 field. And when that's the case, I think Joltik Box is actually looking a lot more appealing. Checking out the Japan Championships, which was the Black Bolt and White Flare format, there were a couple of them in the top 32, and one of them made it all the way to top 4. But once again, the Japan Championships was a ton of Raging Bolt, lots of them that top 16, and it was inevitable that the Joltik Box was eventually going to hit one and have an awkward time. Let's take a look at the online representation then for decks. This is the popularity of them, not how successful they're being. But again, this sort of echoes my point that Raging Bolt is really dipping in that popularity down to just 6.4% online right now. And when that's the big headache for Joltik, the worst matchup I think on paper, with it in decline, it actually might create a decent pocket for Joltik heading into the World Championships as another aggressive option that can simply close the best of 3 games within the time constraints. And I also low-key like the Golden Go matchup with a few tech cards we're going to discuss, and with that surging in popularity as of late, that's gotta be a decent spot for Joltik. Let's take a look at that Trainer Hill matchup data then from the 18th of July all the way up to the 10th of August. I actually think this is a pretty appealing matchup spread. You're decent into Charizard, which has been picking up in popularity since the NAIC. Also pretty solid into Grimmsnarl, which is certainly sort of among the top 5 decks universally by the player base. You have a bunch of even matchups into Dragazard, Dragadusk, Flareon, Gardevoir, and Golden Go. Again, I'm going to mention some tech cards that might make that Golden Go even more favourable, with your unfavoured being the straight Dragapult, the Typhlosion, and the Raging Bolt. To me, this looks like a really decent spread, to be honest with you. You're not completely out the game against anything necessarily, and you're at least balanced into Draga and Guardy with a favourable Grim. So with all these other stage 2s having to do the rock, paper, scissors, Joltik Box kind of gets out of that one scot-free, and is also playable into the majority of other matchups in the field. Next, let's talk about some tools then, because the skeleton did not have any in there despite having 4 copies of Arven. So I think at minimum you're playing 2 tools within your deck, but I think there's range there to go even up to 4 tools within those final few slots. I think you absolutely need to have either one of Air Balloon or Rescue Board in your deck. This gives you prizing coverage for your Latias EX, and also means that from an Arven turn 1, no matter what lead you have other than Iron Hands or Blood Moon, you can go Nest Ball for the Miraidon, then Miraidon out your other chaps, whilst ballooning or rescue boarding your single retreat cost Pokemon and getting into that Joltik. It simply buffs your stats way too much for getting a turn 1 Jolting charge. It may not seem like it, but there's actually a debate in this instance, where Air Balloon in a lot of other decks is just simply far superior. There's actually a non-zero amount of situations where an Iron Hands will be punched by a Pokemon and actually puts it into range of a rescue board, providing free retreat even for the usual 4 retreat cost of Iron Hands. And I suppose the same could be said for Blood Moon as well. There's going to be decks like Grimmsnarl, like Gardevoir, that like to throw Monkey Dory into the mix and get you close to a KO, and suddenly a rescue board could give you a nice pivot option if ever you need it. And every other basic in the deck has a single retreat cost, other than Blood Moon that has a 3 retreat cost, so Air Balloon only helps out in situations where you somehow have Air Balloon plus Crispin in your hand when you led Blood Moon and prized Latias and have no other ball search cards. So it's like a really low percentage reason to go Air Balloon over the rescue board here. I think the only caveat to this, where I would still go Air Balloon, is if you're also playing a Future Booster Energy Capsule in your deck as well. Now Future Booster gives you the free retreat cost for your Iron Hands if you happen to lead that Pokemon, and that sort of takes out the whole debate of the rescue board, and you may as well have the small upside of Air Balloon if ever you have to deal with your Blood Moon. Not only is Future Booster Energy Capsule a great pivot for your Iron Hands, giving you some pricing protection for Lati, but also it's a damage modifier here. It pushes your Ampy very much into 140, allowing you to knock out a Pidgeot EX for 3 prize cards, and some crucial threats in the meta like Slitherwing and Scizor for 2 prize cards as well. It even opens the door for Arm Press to be a more dangerous threat, now reaching the likes of Mew EX and Ethan's Typhlosions. So low-key, there have been a lot of spots where I've used that Future Booster for the damage mod as well. The other interesting damage modifiers are Vitality Band, giving you a +10. This does let you Arm Press through a Typhlosion if you have to. It also lets you attack with Miraidon for 230 into other basic EX Pokemon, making it more usable in the mirror. And it also opens the door for your Pikachu EX to hit 310 into a Gardevoir. Gardevoir is one of the few stage 2s that we can't hit for weakness, so is actually the most difficult Pokemon to knock out in this instance, without having a Vitality Band or Gravity Mountain in the list. Vit Band being the one that you can easily search, of course, via your Arvens. Brave Bangle is actually a really interesting tool in the deck as well, in that it only works on your Galvantula, but it pushes your 180 damage all the way up to 210, making Galvantula able to knock out Pheasantipity EX, which is showing up in all sorts of archetypes, which really punishes your opponent for not taking out your Joltik. This card really helps create that sort of catch-22 situation where if your opponent's drawing really well, they can sometimes gust around your Joltik and look to take 2 prize knockouts or at least put more meaningful damage on the board. And in doing so, it opens up this Bangle to be a useful option in the mid-game with Galvantula to once again force them to use Boss's Orders or Counter Catcher in addition to Iono and that other stuff, to keep ignoring this card even into the late game. Brave Bangle definitely helpful in the Raging Bolt matchup, where no doubt they're going to look to Nox Alpha Prime Catcher and ignore that Joltik. It gives you the option to crack back with your Galvantula into their Fez or Teal Mask, and keep forcing them to have more and more Gust, trying to starve them out of Sada. I think within your list, if you're only ever playing 2 tools, one of the retreat costing tools and one of the damage mods is typically where I like to sit. However, there's also a lot of reason to like the other tools on the page here as well. Bravery Charm buffing your Pokemon by 50 hit points. As we know, Dragapult, Guardy, Grimmsnarl, they're all trying to be really cute with their math and set up KOs. A Bravery Charm at the right time can completely prevent that. Although remember that Dragapult will still be playing Jamming Tower in their list, so it's not a foolproof plan against that list. So it's not a foolproof plan against them, but it does create more pieces of their combo required. And this deck is really good at running the clock down against the opponent because the threat of Iron Hands every turn. Power Glass is the big tech card that I think can massively improve your Golden Go matchup, because almost every Golden Go list has no answers to Pikachu EX right now. Heading into the NAIC, a lot of the Golden Go played Venture Bomb in addition to Monkey Dory in their list, and that's fallen by the wayside with the shiny new Genesect DX builds. So into the Golden Go matchup, you can far more reasonably spam your Pikachu, knowing that your Power Glass is safe to recover one of those attachments. And then finally, Counter Gain. I don't see this one too often, but it does give you an interesting option, again in the deck, where if your Joltik is dealt with, you could then Arven for Counter Gain to be your 4th energy on your initial attacking Iron Hands. So your opponent's gone down to 5, you can then Counter Gain and spend a manual attachment elsewhere. It almost turns Arven into a pseudo Crispin for that turn only, so that you can have multiple threats established, even if you're whiffing on your Crispins. I think this one's definitely the most niche in that it's best with just attacking with Miraidon or Hands themselves, but it does give you some nice coverage if you're just lacking the crucial supporters that you need throughout the game. Beyond tools then, there are some other cards that you can certainly debate. The deck currently plays no hand disruption whatsoever, and actually no hand refresh, and it sounds strange, but 1 copy of Iono does give you some decent reliability of finding this card, because you naturally thin so many energy out your deck, so many Pokemon out your deck, that those mid-game Pokegears do have decent odds of finding this one of, and giving you hand disruption when you need it. This card can be especially effective if you're just going to push a Pikachu and pass for a turn. Thanks to your Resolute Heart ability, you can easily just get a manual attachment somewhere, send up the peak, slam Iono, ask your opponent if they don't have it, for the following turn you to find 1 more energy to sort of close out the game in a lot of instances. Gravity Mountain is a stadium card that can give us more coverage into those stage 2 decks. It essentially turns Pikachu into a catch-all KO Pokemon, without the need for any of this weakness shenanigans. The main issue with Gravity Mountain is you have no way of finding this card in the deck. You kind of just have to draw into it at the right time, and I think it's kind of unreliable, to be honest. Even if you want to play 2 copies in the deck, you simply don't draw enough cards in the list. You're really tutoring throughout the entire game. So I think this one's a tough ask compared to something like a Vit Band, even though it's more limited of an option. As for one of item cards that can make it into the deck thanks to our 4 copies of Arven, Night Stretcher can let us be more liberal with our Ultra Balls throughout the game, so we can simply draw as much as possible with Mew EX. And it also gives us a little bit of prizing coverage as well. For example, if you need Clefairy in a matchup, you can recover it. If you've prized one of your Metal energy, you can recover it and reuse Pikachu. And yeah, just an overall decent coverage card that lets you be more aggressive with Ultra Ball. Energy Switch can be a way similar to the Brave Bangle that can punish your opponent for keeping Joltik on the board, where that first energy attachment can now be used on other Pokemon to attack with. Again, creating this situation where Arven is a pseudo Crispin. It means you can be more committed down one route throughout the game with Joltik or Crispin, knowing that you can always repair the situation and surprise your opponent and catch them off guard with this one-off inclusion. And then for a couple Pokemon that can make it into the list, the Ace Nullifier Genesect has been a hot topic of discussion as of late, with the hype of Golden Go heading into the World Championships. That's one good reason to have it in the deck, but actually the primary reason I think it makes it into Joltik Box is trying to balance that Raging Bolt matchup. where it's very easy for the opponent to go first because you're going to opt second with Joltik, and on turn 2 go Sada plus Prime Catcher and take out the first Pokemon that you've powered up. That includes Pikachu, by the way, because Slitherwing with its burn does get around the Resolute Heart of Pikachu. So the solution would simply be that on turn 1 going second, you find Ace Nullifier, commit your tool to it, and suddenly they can no longer Sada Prime, and you have a safe way into the game. At the same time, Genesect can be very useful in other aggressive mirror matches, denying Prime Catcher more in general, and it's just another one of these cards where if you happen to see it early enough in the game, it can disrupt all sorts of opponents. The other basic I would definitely consider is Iron Bundle. The deck is already playing 4 Boss, 4 Gear, and 1 Prime Catcher, but there are situations where you have Ball Search available, and the bundle is going to be sufficient to push a lone single prizer in the active to push a 2-prizer up front, or if the opponent's trying to sponge with their big multi-prizer, push it to the back for Iron Hands to take another 2. All the while it means you're not playing boss, which means you can be setting up other things via Crispin. Now let's take a peek at a few example deck lists then. This is the one that I've been on as of late. I've kind of made my case for all the tools, so I'm still debating that the most here. But the list in front of you is trying to be as straightforward as possible, playing 3 tool cards, one of them being the booster, which means Balloon is better than Rescue Board. Then rather than any other damage mod, I just have the Power Glass here, so I can push through the Golden Go back to back. Those final slots are the Night Stretcher, meaning I can be more aggressive Ultra Balling for restart, and I've actually bumped up the count to 2 copies of Mew EX. It gives you an additional good lead into the deck, it gives you prizing coverage, and there's been a non-zero amount of games where I've put double Mew plus Fez into play, because again, your supporters don't do anything, you just have to draw from your abilities here. I really like this shell as a sort of just get into the game's approach, and just be as straightforward as possible. Next up is a build that's forced 1 copy of Iono into the deck, just to give yourself that little bit of option. I'm still playing the 2 Mew and the 1 Night Stretcher, because I think they're really valuable. But in this case, I'm quite skimpy on tools, just the 2 count here. Bravery Charm, that good math offsetter, and the Rescue Board being the better choice when you're not playing a future booster in your list. So that if the Iron Hands or Blood Moon do get poked, you can still move those Pokemon out of the active, even if you don't have Lati available or space for it in play. Then finally an Ace Nullifier build here, where I've gone down to 1 Mew to fit that Genesect. And realistically, you don't have to go overboard with tools to fit the Genesect. I think 3 is fine here, because in almost every matchup you'll float one of these regardless. But because I'm playing the Genesect, I'm really trying to lean into beating that Raging Bolt still, so I have the Bangle in the list as well. I think of the bunch, this will be the best into the Raging Bolt, so if you still respect that matchup and expect to face it at the World Championships more than once, this might be the one to go for. On to the matchups then, and we'll start off with Gardevoir. No doubt this is one when you're coming out the gate swinging with Iron Hands. There's no end of easy targets for you to take. Do bear in mind that your opponent can Bravery Charm up their Monkey Dory to force more Gust out of you, and know that Gardevoir EX is definitely their best attacker in the matchup, because it forces us to have the damage mods in our deck to cleanly KO. That means if you're not playing Vit Band or Mountain in the deck, it's really going to be about getting as much Gust as possible. And as always, because we're taking KOs as quickly as possible, prepping yourself against Iono counter-catcher plays and expecting no Flip the Script to come out late on, and leaning into those Mews is going to be the most beneficial here, so that you can still find those pieces to close out games. Onto the Grimmsnarl matchup then, we do of course have great Grass-type coverage into Grimm, so it's more about the other things within their deck that we have to be concerned about. No doubt this is going to be a matchup where Maractus is going to be involved. The lists I've shown so far have just played 1 Prime and 1 Iron Leaves. Fortunately, because you're Iron Handing so often, you should be able to make these 2 pivot options still close the game for you. Bear in mind as well that with 2 Psychic in the deck, trapping Latias is actually a mistake for them, because you can Crispin and power that up to attack if you have to. Also be aware, of course, that they have that Blood Moon Ursaluna as a late game finisher, and they're going to try and make the map as awkward as possible for you. Just know that, again, Iron Hands is definitely your best friend here. It doesn't have an ability, so even with Freezing Shroud, it's hard for the Grimmsnarl to cleanly knock out this Pokemon, especially if you're Bravery Charming it up. And then you can use those Grass energy that you've accumulated to pivot into your Iron Leaves to take a knockout on the Grimm quite happily. Onto the Dragapult matchup then, similar to Grimmsnarl really, in that it has the Maractus in its deck, no doubt, and it has late game Blood Moon Ursaluna potential. The easiest way for you to knock out that Dragapult is no doubt going to be the Liz Clefairy EX, and just be aware that they pack the counter catchers, the Ionos and whatnot. So again, don't assume that your Pheasantipity is always going to be online, and lean more towards those Mew EX. The Drago Dusknoir matchup is somewhat more problematic in that Curse Blasting from their Ghosts can allow them to KO the Iron Hands a little quicker, and it also makes their Iono and Countercatchers that little bit more devastating. The good news is them filling their board with these Ghosts typically means they have less access to their Cloaks and less draw power throughout the deck. So targeting those down with your Gust is still going to be your best opportunity, allowing them to build a Dragapult EX so that Clefairy can finish it off. Into the Dragozard matchup, definitely be aware that they can always pack that unfair stamp, so if you are going up with those Iron Hands, try and get a mute established early. You have type coverage for both the Zard and the Dragapult, so they are quite squishy multi-prizers, so the way you manipulate your energy throughout the game is going to be vital. Into the Golden Go matchup then, I think this one's pretty reasonable for you in that it's hard for your opponent to have Boss's Orders plus Energy Search Pro ready in time after you've used a Jolting Charge, for you to actually take the lead with Pikachu. And again, right now, most builds don't have an answer to Pika, so you can reliably commit to it. Oftentimes over-attaching after a Joltik or with a Crispin, expecting that Pikachu to stick around. Do be aware that they use that Sizzle aggressively. If you're playing the Future Booster, this should be no problem. Also be aware that your opponent does play Tool Scrapper, so if you are committing some of your tools proactively, especially if it's your Power Glass or Future Booster, you could get punished for that immediately. So holding these cards for the crucial time is going to be more beneficial to you, because Golden Go doesn't play that much disruption. I think the scariest card they could be playing is actually the Iron Bundle that can push your Joltik out the way and give them a really reliable Make It Rain. Even if they're popping your Pikachu, it means you can't reliably overcommit your attachments to this card. So either Miraidon-ing out double Peak or double Joltik in this instance is actually really good. It's one of the few matchups where your 30 hit pointer won't be punished by the opponent for getting 2 single prizes out, because it would still buy you a turn. Into the Raging Bolt matchup again, probably the most iffy I think if they're drawing on all cylinders. They're going to opt first, you're going to opt second, so they always get the best outcome of Noctowling on turn 2, and representing a big knockout wherever you commit your attachments. Again, including Pikachu, because Burn can still KO you, and get around Pheasantipity at the same time. Scratch all that if you're playing the Ace Nullifier Genesect, that's a great tech card here. Failing that, at the very least, you have Future Booster that can maybe get into a Slitherwing, so trying to half set up multiple hands could be okay. Bear in mind that Miraidon can be oftentimes as good or better than Pikachu in this instance, provided that you can be gusting their Ogerpons and Fez as you go. No doubt, though, this one's a tricky one. The mirror match can get really weird because Pikachu, of course, expends a bunch of energy and can't be KO'd by the opponent cleanly either. A lot of the time, this comes down to what tool selection your opponent has, whether they have the Power Glass, whether they have Vit Band. Galvantula is a really good attacker, even if they don't play the Bangle, because Mui-X oftentimes find itself onto the board. So amping through the first Joltik, knowing that your hands could easily get response KO'd, is actually probably the best thing you can do here. If you have priority, you're starting Iron Hands. If your opponent has priority, you're starting to power out your Pikas, and forcing them to just have way too much Gust required to close out games, because they're not able to Crispin every turn. If you're the one with that priority and take the first 2 on their Joltik, it's down to you then finding a way around the Pikachu for a couple turns. Oftentimes that means that Blood Moon will be your finisher. The Flareon matchup, similar to Raging Bolt actually, is a really tricky one. Not so much because they can get around the Pikachu, but actually because they can take the 1 so comfortably and it actually helps them out, because obviously they're maining Bra in their deck. So as long as they can manipulate the prizes, they can quite happily go 1, 2, 3 here. And Joltik really doesn't have much in the way of going around the prize trade in that regard. So it is possible for them to Jewel Seeker combo that even requires something like Briar plus Countercatcher plus like Sparkling Crystal. If they can hold those sorts of things, they can get it all together in 1 turn without you playing Iono in your list. Typhlosion's also a bit of a tricky matchup. They have easy reach into your Pokemon. Trying to Bravery Charm your initial hands is of course the best thing you can do, and force them to get the full 4 discard of Ethan rather than 3 plus Bangle, which is much easier for them to do via 1 Arven to get Secret Box Bangle, after a few Quilavas using Bond. Also be aware that Cyndaquil can poke for 30 here. Try not to proactively search out your Joltik, because it can get immediately punished if you've been forced first. Same thing for the Quilava actually, that can also get the first prize on you if it has to. This is a matchup where you have to hope that they're forced to put down Pidgeot or Pheasantipity during the game. Look towards a line of Amp plus close the game. Ideally it's a Fez so you can finish off with Blood Moon. Failing that, this one's going to be a tricky one. And then we end on the Charizard matchup. This one's pretty reasonable for us. There is the pitfall of Briar, but generally we do have type coverage into both Charizard via Galvantula and Leaves, as well as the Pidgeot actually, making Miraidon a really good attacker. It can knock out the Fez, but also knock out Pidgeot quite happily. Pikachu's also a headache for them at times. I think one of the pitfall is when you're forced into Iron Leaves, be aware that Chi-Yu could be a response KO from them. And there's a small possibility for them to get a turn 2 Gust KO on you with Max Belt. Bit of a high roll, obviously, because it would have to be with Boss rather than Countercatcher most likely. But generally, I think you have easy ways to sculpt 2 prizes a turn here. That's it for Joltik Box then. Let me know what you guys thought. Are you with me in thinking that it's actually a low-key decent play for the tournament? Or with Raging Bolt being ever-present, is it still a risky one? There's no doubt that this deck takes player agency completely out of the window here, in that you're really, really limited to simply what's in your hand and what you draw once or twice during the game via Mew. The good news is you have a very straightforward early game strategy that gets you into games and sets the tone to force your opponent to keep up and draw well every game you face. And at the same time, you do have some flexibility and modality as the game continues, where you search out your Pokemon, how you choose to crisp in, all of these factors do end up mattering. That can add to your percentage points getting to the late game as they're trying to use that Panic Iono. In a lot of instances, you could just be 1 or 2 cards away from still closing a game and have a good amount of draw at your disposal. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers.